The last message came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. 4 words, that's all. No punctuation, no follow-up. Just 4 words sent from a Samsung Galaxy S21 to a contact saved as Bree, home, and then silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like quiet. The kind that feels like something being cut off mid-breath. I think someone's here. Brianna Colette Marsh was 26 years old. She lived alone in a second-floor apartment on Glenwood Avenue in Durham, North Carolina, a wide, tree-lined street in a neighborhood that sat right on the edge of gentrification. The kind of block where renovated craftsman homes sat 3 doors down from houses with plywood on the windows and grass growing through the porch slats. Not dangerous exactly. Not safe exactly. The kind of neighborhood where people minded their business and kept their porch lights off because that's just how it was. Brianna had lived there for 14 months. Moved in after finishing her master's degree in social work at NC State, landed a job with a Durham County Family Services nonprofit, and built herself a quiet, careful, organized little life. Her apartment was on the smaller side, living room, kitchen, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, but she'd made it hers. Plants on every windowsill, books stacked on every flat surface, a whiteboard on the kitchen wall where she wrote her weekly schedule in 3 colors: black for work, blue for personal, red for things she absolutely could not forget. She was the kind of person who texted back within 5 minutes. Who remembered your coffee order? Who showed up early to things because showing up late made her physically anxious. Her coworkers at the nonprofit called her the most organized human being they had ever encountered, and they said it with complete sincerity and only a small amount of exhaustion. She was also the kind of person who did not scare easily. That's what made the text so alarming to the person who received it. Bree, the contact in Brianna's phone, was her older sister, Camille Marsh, Okafor, 31 years old, living in Raleigh with her husband and their 2 kids. Camille and Brianna talked every day, texted constantly. The kind of sisters who had a shared note on their phones, just for funny things they wanted to tell each other later. Camille knew her sister's patterns. The way you know a song you've been listening to your whole life, you notice the second something sounds off. She saw the message at 11:52 p.m., 5 minutes after it was sent. She was already in bed, phone on the nightstand, half asleep. She sat up and read it twice. Then she called. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Brianna's recorded voice, calm and slightly formal, the way she always sounded on recordings. "You've reached Brianna. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you." Camille hung up and called again. Same result. She texted Bree, "Call me right now." She texted, "I'm serious, pick up." She texted, "I'm calling the police if you don't answer me in 5 minutes." No response, no read receipt. The messages sat there, delivered, not read, like they'd been sent into a room where no one was home. At 12:09 a.m., Camille called the Durham Police Department non-emergency line. The dispatcher was patient and professional and explained, gently, that a missing persons report typically required a 24-hour waiting period, and that the text message, while concerning, didn't necessarily indicate an emergency. Camille, who was now standing in her kitchen in her pajamas, with her heart doing something that didn't feel like a normal heartbeat, asked the dispatcher what she was supposed to do with, "I think someone's here," and 20 minutes of no response from a woman who texted back in under 5 minutes her entire adult life. The dispatcher sent a wellness check. 2 Durham PD officers arrived at the Glenwood Avenue apartment at 12:34 a.m. They knocked. They announced themselves. No answer. The building manager was called and arrived at 12:51 a.m. with a key. The officers entered at 12:53 a.m. The apartment was empty, not ransacked, not destroyed. Not the chaotic aftermath of a struggle that you see in movies. Just empty, lights on, television on muted, playing a cooking competition rerun. A half-eaten bowl of cereal on the coffee table, spoon still in it, milk not yet fully separated. An open laptop on the couch, screen still lit. A half-finished work email on the screen that ended mid-sentence. and on the kitchen whiteboard, in red marker, the color she used for things she absolutely could not forget, a single word that hadn't been there when her coworker had stopped by 2 days prior. One word, written in Brianna's handwriting, pressed hard into the board like she'd been pushing against something while she wrote it. No RTH. Nobody knew what it meant. Not then. Not for a long time after. Camille Marsh. Okafor drove to Durham at 2 in the morning. She didn't wait for her husband to talk her out of it. Didn't stop to think about the logistics of leaving 2 sleeping kids in a house. Didn't do anything except pull on clothes, grab her keys, and get on I-40 West while her hands did that thing they do when your body is running on adrenaline and your brain hasn't fully caught up yet. She made the 25-minute drive in 18 minutes. She parked crooked in front of the building and was up the stairs before the engine finished ticking. The 2 officers were still there when she arrived. They were professional, kind, and clearly not yet treating this as anything more than a wellness check with an ambiguous outcome. One of them, a younger guy named Officer Tate, walked her through what they'd found, or more accurately, what they hadn't found. No signs of forced entry on the front door or the windows. No signs of a physical struggle. Personal belongings appeared to be intact. Wallet on the kitchen counter. Keys on the hook by the door. Both of Brianna's pairs of shoes, her work flats, and her everyday sneakers, sitting on the mat inside the entrance. Camille stopped when she heard that last part. Both pairs. Both pairs we could see. Yes, Mom. Camille knew her sister owned exactly 3 pairs of shoes. The flats, the sneakers, and a pair of worn, in running shoes she kept by the back of her closet and used maybe twice a week for early morning runs along the American Tobacco Trail. She walked past the officers and went straight to the bedroom closet, pushed the door open, and looked at the floor. The running shoes were gone. She turned around and told Officer Tate. He wrote it down. His expression shifted, not dramatically, not the way it does in movies, just a subtle recalibration, the kind that happens when a data point doesn't fit the working assumption. So she may have left on foot, he said. At midnight, Camille said. In November, without her phone, without her wallet, without texting me back. He wrote that down too. The formal missing persons report was filed at 3:15 a.m. By Durham PD standards, the circumstances were unusual enough to bypass the standard waiting period. The unanswered distress text, the abandoned phone, the mid-sentence email, the cereal going soggy on the table. Detective Lena Voss was assigned to the case by 8 o'clock that morning. She was 43, 12 years in investigations, the kind of detective who didn't theorize out loud until she had something solid to theorize with. She had short natural hair, reading glasses she was always losing, and a reputation among her colleagues for being almost supernaturally patient in interviews, the kind of patient that made people fill silences they should have let sit. Lena arrived at the Glenwood Avenue apartment at 8:45 a.m. and spent 2 hours going through it with the focused, unhurried attention of someone reading a book they intend to finish. She noted everything Camille and the overnight officers had noted. She also noted several things they hadn't. The window above the kitchen sink was unlocked. It faced a narrow side alley between Brianna's building and the neighboring property. There was no screen on it, Camille mentioned, when asked that Brianna had removed the screen back in the summer because a bird had gotten trapped between the screen and the glass, and she'd never gotten around to replacing it. The window itself showed no signs of forced entry, but the exterior sill had a faint scuff mark along the bottom edge, the kind of mark that could mean nothing, or could mean someone had used it as a handhold. Lena photographed it without comment. She spent a long time in front of the kitchen whiteboard, read the word Narch 4 times, took 3 photos from different angles. Then she turned to Camille, who had been standing in the kitchen doorway for most of the walkthrough, arms crossed tight over her chest, watching. "Did your sister have any connection to anything north of here?" Lena asked. A person, a place, a job, anything she mentioned recently. Camille thought about it carefully. She was a precise thinker, the kind of person who didn't say yes or no until she was sure. Not that I can think of. Our parents are in Charlotte, that's southwest. She didn't really travel. She didn't have a... She stopped. Lena waited. She mentioned someone. Camille said slowly. About 3 weeks ago. A new client at her job. She didn't give me a name, she never does, confidentiality. But she said something about it that stuck with me. She uncrossed her arms. She said the case made her uncomfortable in a way she couldn't explain. Said the guy gave her what she called a still feeling, like the air around him didn't move right. Lena wrote it down. Did she say anything else about him? Camille looked at the whiteboard. At that single red word pressed hard into the surface. She said he'd grown up somewhere rural. Somewhere north of the city. She said he talked about going back there someday, like it was the only thing he ever really wanted. The apartment was quiet. Outside, Durham was waking up. Traffic sounds, a distant siren. Someone's music from a car stopped at the light on the corner. Normal city morning sounds that had no idea what was happening 2 floors above them. Lena capped her pen. I'm going to need to talk to her supervisor at the nonprofit, she said. Today. The nonprofit was called Cornerstone Family Services, and it operated out of a converted brick building on Foster Street in downtown Durham, the kind of office that had mismatched furniture and motivational quotes on the walls, and a coffee maker that had been broken for 6 weeks, but nobody had gotten around to replacing. The kind of place that did genuinely important work on genuinely insufficient funding and wore that contradiction with a particular brand of tired pride. Brianna's supervisor was a woman named Patricia Odom, 57 years old, 23 years in social services, the kind of institutional knowledge that couldn't be taught in a classroom and couldn't be replaced when it walked out the door. She met Detective Lena Voss in a small conference room at 11:15 that morning, and she was already visibly shaken. Word had moved through the office fast, the way it does in small organizations where everyone knows everyone, and a missing colleague isn't an abstract news story. It's the person who sat across from you at the staff meeting 2 days ago. Patricia confirmed what Camille had described. Brianna had come to her approximately 3 weeks prior. Patricia checked her notes, confirmed it was October 21st, to flag a client interaction that was making her uncomfortable. The client had been assigned to Brianna through the county's voluntary family stabilization program, a service available to individuals who requested support navigating housing, employment, and family reunification resources. The program was voluntary. Clients came to them. This particular client had requested services in late September. His intake file listed his name as Daniel Cruz, 34 years old. Listed address was a rooming house on Angier Avenue in East Durham. Stated reason for seeking services: assistance with housing stability and reconnecting with an estranged minor child. Patricia slid a copy of the intake form across the table with identifying information she was legally permitted to share under the circumstances. She clarified carefully. Lena noted the precision. This was a woman who knew exactly where the lines were. Daniel Cruz had attended 2 scheduled appointments with Brianna. The 3rd appointment, scheduled for October 28th, he had not shown up for. Brianna had made 2 follow-up calls per protocol. No answer either time. The case had been flagged as inactive pending re-engagement. What made Brianna uncomfortable? Lena asked. Patricia folded her hands on the table. She said he asked questions that weren't typical for a client in that program. Not about housing resources. Not about the reunification process. Personal questions about her schedule. Whether she worked late. Whether she drove to work or took the bus. She paused. She redirected him each time, the way we train staff to do. But she said he had a way of asking things that didn't feel like curiosity. She said it felt like he was building a picture. Lena kept her expression neutral. Did she report feeling physically threatened at any point? No. Nothing overt. That's what made it hard to act on formally. There was nothing she could point to and say, "This is a threat." It was all just. Patricia searched for the word. Texture. The wrong texture to everything he said. Lena took the intake form, and the case notes Patricia was authorized to provide, and drove directly back to the precinct. She ran Daniel Cruz through the system before she'd even taken her coat off. The Angier Avenue address was a dead end. The rooming house manager confirmed a Daniel Cruz had paid 1 month's rent in cash in late September and had not been seen since the first week of October. No forwarding address, no contact number that worked. The phone number listed on the intake form rang twice, and then played a tone indicating the number had been disconnected. The name Daniel Cruz returned 2 hits in the North Carolina criminal database. One was a 58-year-old man in Wilmington with 2 DUI convictions, clearly not the same person. The other was a 2019 arrest record for a Daniel Aaron Cruz, 31 years old at the time of arrest, charged with stalking and criminal trespass in Alamance County. The charges had been pleaded down to a single misdemeanor harassment charge. He had completed 12 months of supervised probation and been discharged from supervision in March of 2021. The address on the 2019 arrest record listed a rural property in Alamance County, outside the small town of Mebane, approximately 35 miles northwest of Durham, northwest. North, Lena sat with that for a moment. Then she pulled up a map. Mebane sat at the edge of a stretch of rural Alamance County that thinned out fast into farmland and tree lines, and long unpaved roads with no addresses that showed up cleanly on GPS. The kind of geography that swallowed things. The kind that made searches complicated and evidence harder to preserve, and witnesses essentially non-existent because there were no witnesses, just land and tree cover, and whatever happened to be out there underneath all that quiet. She called Camille Marsh. Okafor on the way to her car. The word on the whiteboard. Lena said, "North. Is there any chance your sister knew where this client was from? Any chance she'd looked it up herself?" There was a pause on the line. Bree was careful, Camille said. But when something bothered her, she researched it. That's just how she was. She couldn't leave a loose thread alone. Another pause, longer this time. "You think she knew something?" "I think she may have figured something out," Lena said carefully. "And I think she may have written it down before she had a chance to tell anyone." She was already pulling onto the highway heading west when her phone buzzed with a text from her partner back at the precinct. She read it at the next red light. It was 3 lines long, and it changed the entire shape of the investigation in the space of 10 seconds. The 2019 stalking victim in Alamance County. The woman Daniel Cruz had pleaded down to misdemeanor harassment for targeting. Her name was Lauren Tisby, 24 years old at the time, social work student at Elon University. She had disappeared 8 months after the charges were filed. Her case was still open, still cold, still sitting in an Alamance County sheriff's file with almost nothing in it. Lena put the phone down and pressed harder on the gas. The Alamance County Sheriff's Department was not expecting her. Lena had called ahead, professional courtesy, jurisdictional respect, all the right boxes checked. But the detective who met her at the front desk of the Graham headquarters had the particular energy of someone who had been handed an unwelcome complication on an otherwise manageable Wednesday. His name was Detective Ron Hapley, late 50s, broad through the shoulders, the kind of man who had probably been imposing at 30 and had settled into something more like immovable by 55. He shook her hand with the precise amount of warmth required and not 1 degree more. "Lauren Tisby case," he said, leading her down a hallway that smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. "Been a while since anybody asked about that one." "How long is a while?" Lena asked. "Last active inquiry was about 14 months ago. Journalist out of Greensboro doing a piece on cold cases in rural counties. Never ran the story far as I know." He pulled the file himself from a cabinet in a back office and set it on a table, between them with the careful neutrality of a man who had already decided this visit wasn't going to produce anything useful. Lena opened it and read without speaking for several minutes. Lauren Tisby had been 24 years old when she disappeared in November of 2020. Social work student, Elon University, one semester from graduating. She had been living in a studio apartment in Burlington, the largest city in Alamance County, while completing a field placement at a local family services agency, the kind of placement that was standard for graduate students in her program. She had last been seen leaving that agency on a Thursday evening at approximately 6:15 p.m. Her car, a gray Honda Fit, was found 2 days later parked on a rural road off Highway 54, about 7 miles outside of Mabane, engine off, doors locked. Her bag inside with her wallet and phone. Her phone had received one incoming call at 6:41 p.m. the night she disappeared. The number was unregistered, a prepaid burner. The call lasted 11 seconds. She was never found. The connection to Daniel Cruz was documented in the file, the 2019 stalking charge, the plea, the probation. Hapley's notes from the original investigation indicated that Cruz had been interviewed twice in the weeks following Lauren's disappearance. He had provided an alibi for the evening in question. He claimed he'd been at a bar in Mabane called Rudy's Tap with 2 friends who corroborated his presence until approximately 9 p.m. The bar had no functional security cameras at the time. The friends were men Cruz had known since high school, whose statements Hapley's notes described as consistent, though Lena noticed he had not written the word credible anywhere near that description. The investigation had stalled. No physical evidence connecting Cruz to Lauren's disappearance had been recovered. Without a body, without forensic evidence, without a witness who put him in the wrong place at the wrong time, the case had gone cold with Daniel Cruz as a person of interest who could not be elevated to a suspect. Lena looked up from the file. Did you ever search the family property? The rural land outside Mabane. Hapley shifted in his chair. We requested consent. He declined. We looked at a warrant. Judge felt we didn't have sufficient probable cause at the time. At the time, Lena repeated. Case went cold before we could build further. Lena closed the file. She kept her voice even and her face neutral, because she was a professional, and because Ron Hapley wasn't her enemy, and because burning bridges in a joint investigation helped nobody. But something was tightening in her chest the way it did when pieces aligned into a shape that was both clearer and worse than what she'd started with. She drove out to the Cruz property herself that afternoon. She didn't go in, no warrant, no jurisdiction, no legal basis to set foot on the land. She parked on the county road and looked at it from the outside. A long gravel driveway disappearing into tree cover. A rusted gate, padlock, with a faded no trespassing sign wired to it. Overgrown fields on either side. A structure visible in the far distance through the bare November trees. A farmhouse or something like one, dark, no visible lights. The property records she'd pulled that morning showed it was registered to a Margaret Elaine Cruz, Daniel's mother. Assessed value was low, consistent with land that hadn't been actively farmed in years. No liens. No recent activity in the county records. She sat in her car and thought for a long time. Then her phone rang. It was her partner, Detective Sam Greer, back in Durham. His voice had the particular quality it got when something had broken open. Lena, we got a hit on the cell tower data. Brianna's phone, the Samsung Galaxy S21 left behind in the Glenwood Avenue apartment, had been analyzed by the digital forensics unit. The phone itself was dead and clean, still sitting on the kitchen counter where the overnight officers had photographed it. But the carrier record subpoenaed that morning told a different story. In the 72 hours before Brianna sent that final text, her phone had connected to a cell tower on 3 occasions that were inconsistent with her normal pattern. 2 connections to a tower that serviced an area along I-85 North. 1 connection to a tower outside Burlington, Alamance County, Burlington, 7 miles from Mabane. Brianna Marsh had driven to Alamance County sometime in the 3 days before she disappeared. She had gone looking for something or someone, and she had gone alone, without telling her sister, without telling her supervisor, without leaving any note except a single word in red marker on a whiteboard in her kitchen. Lena stared at the gate and the gravel driveway, and the dark shape of the structure in the trees. But the worst part, the part that she would turn over in her mind for months afterward, was still coming. Sam wasn't finished. "The Burlington Tower ping," he said. "We'll cross-referenced it with the carrier data we pulled on the burner number that called Lauren Tisby the night she disappeared." He paused. "Lena, it's the same tower, same coverage zone. Brianna's phone and that burner number, they both pinged the same tower. But they didn't ping it at the same time." "When did the burner ping it?" Lena asked, though she already felt the answer forming like ice in her stomach. "Tuesday night," Sam said. 11:40 p.m., 13 minutes before Brianna sent that text. 13 minutes. Whoever had that burner phone, the same burner that had called Lauren Tisby 11 seconds before she vanished, had been in Burlington, near Mabane, near that property, at 11:40 p.m., on the night Brianna disappeared. And Brianna had been there too. She hadn't just written NARTH on the whiteboard and waited. She had gone there first. She had driven out to Alamance County, seen something, come home, and then, 13 minutes after whoever was on that property apparently moved, sent 4 words to her sister and disappeared from a second-floor apartment with no forced entry and a scuff mark on a window sill. She hadn't been taken from her apartment. She had gone back. The warrant came through on a Friday morning, 41 hours after Brianna Marsh was reported missing. It had taken a federal assist to get it. Sam had worked the phone for the better part of Thursday, while Lena drove back and forth between Durham and Graham Building, the probable cause document with the kind of granular, obsessive attention to detail that warrant applications require when the underlying evidence is circumstantial and the judge is cautious. Cell tower correlations, the Lauren Tisby connection, the intake file, the disconnected phone number, the scuff mark on the windowsill, the running shoes. Individually, each piece was explainable. Together, they built something that a federal magistrate in Greensboro looked at for 20 minutes before signing. The Alamance County Sheriff's Department executed the search with Durham PD present. Lena was there. Hapley was there. 4 deputies, 2 forensic technicians, a K-9 unit. They came down the gravel driveway at 7:15 a.m., with the gray November light just starting to come through the tree cover. And the property revealed itself the way places like that do, slowly, grudgingly, detail by detail. The farmhouse was empty. Had been for some time, based on the dust and the dead insects on the windowsills and the calendar on the kitchen wall still showing March of 2022. Margaret Cruz, Daniel's mother, had been in a memory care facility in Greensboro since the previous spring. Lena confirmed this before the search. The house itself yielded nothing immediately significant. Old furniture, old clothes, a kitchen that smelled like must and something chemical underneath it that the forensic technician flagged for sampling, but couldn't identify on site. The barn behind the house was different. It was newer than the farmhouse. Not new exactly, but newer. The kind of structure added to a property over time by someone who needed space for something specific. The padlock on it was not old. The K-9 unit signaled outside the door before it was opened. Lena noted the time in her notebook, 7:52 a.m. Inside they found evidence of habitation, recent habitation, a cot with a sleeping bag, a camp stove, jugs of water, a battery-powered lantern, food, canned goods, protein bars, things with long shelf lives. And along the far wall, arranged with a neatness that felt deeply wrong in context, a series of items that made the forensic technician stop moving and made Hapley, standing to Lena's left, go completely still. Photographs. Printed photographs, tacked to the wooden wall in a loose grid, 24, maybe more. Some were of Lauren Tisby, her campus ID photo, candid shots taken from a distance, A photo of her car parked outside the Burlington agency where she'd done her placement. Others were of Brianna Marsh, outside the Cornerstone offices on Foster Street, on the American Tobacco Trail in running clothes, sitting in her car at a red light on Glenwood Avenue, driver's side window down, completely unaware. The earliest photograph of Brianna was dated. The printer metadata confirmed this later, September 14th, 3 weeks before Daniel Cruz walked into Cornerstone Family Services and requested a voluntary case assignment. He had found her before she ever knew he existed. He had chosen her. And then he had engineered a reason to sit across a desk from her and watch her up close. Daniel Cruz was not on the property. A bolo went out within the hour. The car associated with his most recent known identity, a 2004 dark blue Ford Taurus, consistent with the vehicle spotted on Route 421 in the entirely separate Harlan County case that nobody had yet connected to anything in Alamance, was not on the property either. It was not found that day. It was not found that week. The forensic sweep of the barn took 2 days. They found trace biological evidence that was sent to the state lab for analysis. They found a section of disturbed earth behind the barn, then a cadaver dog indicated on twice, but excavation yielded nothing conclusive, just soil disturbance consistent with the dog's signal and inconsistent with any innocent agricultural explanation. The state lab results, when they came back 3 weeks later, confirmed the presence of 2 distinct DNA profiles in the biological samples recovered from the barn floor. One matched Brianna Marsh, confirmed through a reference sample provided by Camille. One was unidentified, no match in any state or federal database. Lauren Tisby's DNA was not among the samples recovered. That absence sat in the case file like a stone. Brianna Marsh was not found on the property. She was not found in the weeks that followed. A multi-agency search covered a 12-mile radius around the Cruz property through November and into the first days of December, when the ground hardened and the search parameters had to be revised. Tips came in through a hotline set up by the Durham PD, dozens of them, none actionable. A national missing persons organization featured her case in their December bulletin. A Facebook group with over 40,000 members cataloged every known detail and generated theories in the hundreds. Camille appeared on a local news segment and asked anyone with information to come forward, and held herself together on camera with a composure that looked like it was costing her something she could not afford to keep spending. Daniel Aaron Cruz was placed on the FBI's fugitive list in December. His photograph was distributed nationally. There were 3 reported sightings over the following months, 1 in Tennessee, 1 in rural Virginia, 1 in western Pennsylvania, none confirmed, none leading anywhere. The Lauren Tisby case was formally reopened and federally linked to the Brianna Marsh investigation in January. The Alamance County file that had sat cold for 3 years was suddenly thick with new paperwork and new attention, and the particular energy of institutions that move quickly, once moving quickly, can no longer be avoided. None of it brought either woman home. Lena Voss still works the case. Not full-time, her caseload doesn't allow full-time, but she works it. She has a folder on her desktop she opens every few days. She reads the cell tower data. She looks at the photographs from the barn wall. She thinks about the 11 seconds of a phone call that Lauren Tisby received before she disappeared, and the 4 words Brianna Marsh typed into a phone she never picked up again. She thinks about the running shoes. The thing that stays with her, the thing she has never said out loud to anyone including Sam, because saying it out loud makes it more real in a way she isn't ready for. Is this Brianna Marsh was a social worker. She spent her professional life reading people, assessing risk, identifying danger before it fully materialized. She had felt something wrong about Daniel Cruz weeks before anything happened. She had gone to Patricia. She had written it on the whiteboard. She had driven out to Alamance County on her own to look at something she'd figured out that nobody else had yet. She had come home. She had locked her door. She had sat on her couch with her cereal and her laptop and her half-finished email, and she had still sent those 4 words. Which meant that whatever she had seen at that property, whatever had sent her home feeling like maybe she was safe, maybe she was ahead of it, maybe she had the information she needed, and now she just had to get it to the right people in the morning. Whatever had made her feel like she had a few more hours, she had been wrong about that part. The apartment on Glenwood Avenue has new tenants now. The whiteboard is gone. The plants on the windowsills are different plants tended by different hands. The screen on the kitchen window has been replaced. Somewhere in the rural dark between Burlington and Mabane, November comes every year the same way it always has. Quiet, cold, the trees bare and the fields gray, and the long unpaved roads going nowhere that shows up on any map. The mountains of Appalachia keep their secrets in stone. The flatlands of the Carolina Piedmont keep theirs in silence. And 4 words sit in a read receipt on a dead phone in an evidence locker in Durham, waiting for an answer that has not come, that may never come. I think someone's here.